Thank you very much. I think that's the only place where I'd be applauded for getting arrested, but so I was here last year, which I'm very grateful for, and one of the things I said when I was here last year was, if it became illegal to be pro-life, would there be enough evidence to convict you? And I was actually talking hypothetically, but it turned out to kind of be quite prophetic, because within a few months, I was arrested. Not for the work I do with March for Life, where we do have megaphones in the streets and thousands of people coming together with posters and stage and a lot of noise, but for my silent prayers outside a closed abortion centre. And I was charged with intimidating service users, and I remind you it was a closed abortion centre, so make of that what you will. And it does beg the question, who's intimidating who? So don't underestimate those small, silent prayers that you might say. That is a huge part of the battle, and those who oppose us seem to know it sometimes even more than we do. I've been accused by some, including Anne Furedi, of pulling a publicity stunt, and I've tried to remind Anne that I was doing what I have been doing for the last 20 years. I haven't changed. It's not me that changed. It's not my actions that's changed. It's the law or those imposing it. But most of those 20 years have been pretty much unnoticed. And suddenly, at the end of last year, I actually felt quite thrown into the spotlight with the situation. And I was aware that for some people, I was actually representing what went on outside abortion centres. I was representing pro-life vigils. Maybe even for some people, I was representing what the pro-life movement was. And I say that because I think that's something that is worth us all thinking about, how we all are a representative of the pro-life movement to someone else. If we're not, then the question is, are we really living out our pro-life beliefs properly? It's a bit like if someone's a Christian and nobody knows they're a Christian, well, are they really a Christian? If we're pro-life and nobody knows we're pro-life, it is questionable as whether we are really pro-life. And I'm not saying that to have a go at anyone, because it's something that's very, very easy to change, and it could change right today if you wanted. So this is something that we should all be doing. We should all be trying to represent the pro-life movement and to be the face of the pro-life movement to other people. It might just be people in our family, people at our unis or our workplaces where we study. And it might be if we're actually venturing out and doing some pro-life work. It might be people on the street who pass by. Maybe if we're holding a SPUC chain, or we're doing a witness outside an abortion centre, somebody will see us, and that will be the pro-life movement to them when they see you. So I just wanted to maybe just share for a little bit some pro-life tips on how we can be the best and most effective representatives of the pro-life movement. Because if we are the only person that somebody knows who's pro-life, if we're not really effective, that can damage the whole movement. So the first tip I wanted to share is something very simple, and it's just the importance of being prepared. And this is being prepared in our minds and being prepared in our hearts. Every word that comes out of our mouth is a reflection of what's in our heart and mind. We can't blame anyone else for the insensitive or ill-informed or unpleasant words that we say. We have to take responsibility for that. So if someone catches us off guard by maybe mocking us, or maybe they get angry at us or say something hurtful, that's often when they'll see our hearts for what our hearts are really like. I think the analogy would be like if I don't know, if Louise said she was going to come and visit me tomorrow at 7 o'clock, I would most likely try and vacuum my house and tidy it up and make it look nice. If I wasn't expecting it and she suddenly came and knocked on my door, she'd see my house for what it was really like. And that's often what it's like when we're caught off guard, maybe when someone challenges us, or as I say, maybe even gets a bit angry with us to do with our pro-life beliefs. Often things come out of us that we weren't expecting, and that shows that maybe our hearts and our minds aren't really quite prepared. So have an honest check-in with what's in your heart. So for instance, if somebody were to say to you, I've had 6 abortions and I'm not bothered, in fact I think it was a good thing. Do we judge them and think, well, 1 was bad enough, 6, what were you doing? Or do we actually see the wall that they might have built up to deal with the trauma that they've been through? If we are doing some pro-life work and somebody maybe shouts something disparaging at us, do we respond with a witty retort that we've thought of? Or do we see the confusion and pain that might lie behind that comment and take them seriously? One of the great ways to help prepare our hearts is to listen to testimonies. These really kind of expand our hearts. So listening to testimonies of people who've been through abortion, people who've considered it, maybe people who've changed their mind on it. We've got some great testimonies on March for Life website, but I know there's lots of other places you can hear testimonies. Do that. It will help expand our hearts so that you're never saying, I can't understand how a man could shirk his responsibilities, or I can't understand this woman having an abortion or 10 abortions, or whatever it might be. We've got to get to that place where we do understand it. And also preparing our minds. This is hugely important too. And there's loads of stalls at the back with information on. I can see books. I know on our March for Life stall we've got lots of leaflets. There's SPUC stalls with books and all sorts of information. There's no excuse for going away not having informed minds, or not at least getting started with informing our minds. So our minds should be prepared as well, so that if people ask us some of these most basic questions, we've got an answer for them. The second point I want to talk with about how we can be the best and most effective representatives is to do with fear. I liken fear to being a little bit like grief, in as much as it's something that we sometimes can't help. It affects us. You know, if you're somebody who's had the misfortune of losing somebody close to you, you'll know that ultimately it never really goes away, but you can learn to deal with it so that it doesn't consume you. And equally with fear, we've got to be really careful that fear doesn't consume us. We can't help it if we feel fearful about maybe certain pro-life activities, or even just speaking up about the abortion situation, but it shouldn't prevent us from doing this. I know one of the last campaigns I was running with 40 Days for Life, when some of my volunteers were outside the abortion centre, a lady came in to get an abortion, and the volunteers started talking to her, and she was sharing how she was having an abortion because her last pregnancy had ended in miscarriage, and she was so worried that this pregnancy was going to end in miscarriage, she thought it better just to have an abortion and get it over with quickly. That's what fear can do to you. How illogical is that? But I'm sure we've all experienced fear making us do illogical things at time to time. Thankfully, the volunteers had a conversation with her. She actually had some faith, and they talked about that faith. And one of the volunteers had a picture of Jesus on the back seat. It just happened to be having a picture of Jesus on the back seat of their car, where he was pointing towards his heart. And they brought it out of the car and said, I want you to have this, take it home, put it on the wall of your house, and every time you see it, when you pass by it, look at Jesus and say, Jesus, I trust in you. And the next week, they were at the abortion centre again, those volunteers, and that woman drove up in a car. As you can imagine, their heart stopped, thinking, oh no, she's going to go and have an abortion. But no, she got out and she just looked at them and said, it's worked. I came back to tell you thank you. What if those volunteers had been so overcome by their fears, they hadn't bothered to be there that day? Because they just thought, you know what, I just feel too nervous. Which, I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years. I don't find it easy. I don't think anybody who does go outside abortion centres finds it easy. And most pro-life work has similar fears attached to it. But we mustn't let our fears get the better of us. If we're saying to women in crisis pregnancies, don't base your decision on fear, base it on love, we've got to do the same, or we become hypocrites. And one of the things fear can end up leading to, and this is my next point, is being defensive. So be aware of defensiveness and aggression and anger as well. If we really want to be effective pro-life representatives, then these kind of things can really hinder us effectively being the face of the pro-life movement. And when we look at these things, defensiveness or aggression or anger, they're what I call surface emotions, and it's really good to look at what's behind them, because there's always something behind it. If you're defensive when you're sharing your pro-life beliefs, or if someone challenges you about your pro-life beliefs, is it because you're frustrated? Is it because you're not able to articulate your perspective properly? Is it because maybe you're taking something personally and you're a little bit sensitive in that area? If you're angry, is it because you're still hurting about something and you haven't dealt with that? Is it because you're maybe a little bit confused yourself, or you're feeling indignant? But it is really good to try and understand your anger and your defensiveness. We all feel like that, but it's only when we actually really try and understand it, we maybe look at what's lying behind that, and it's often maybe a failing in ourselves or a weakness in ourselves that we need to work at improving. And once we've done that, we're better placed to understand other people when they're being angry or defensive. We know that it's not necessarily something personal to us. It's usually something that they need to work on themselves. And maybe we can try and look at finding out why they are so angry, why they are defensive, and being tactful and trying to help them work through that. And it's very important because those kind of things, of course, will come across in our voice when we suddenly become, I don't know, louder or higher pitched, or, you know, we talk very quickly, and the other person will pick up on the fact that we're getting defensive or angry. I know a story that Rachel shared with me that I always think it's a really good one to reflect on when we're thinking of anger. She shared how somebody contacted her to do with Rachel's Vineyard, and this person had been in their church and they'd heard their priest speak about abortion, and this made them feel very angry. And they spoke to the priest afterwards, very angry at him, saying, you know, I'm not sure exactly what they said, but, you know, you can imagine, how dare you talk about this. And the priest recommended them to you know, look at Rachel's Vineyard. He may be guessing that they might be post-abortive. But I think this person was still continued to be quite angry at the priest. Anyway, that lady did contact Rachel at Rachel's Vineyard. And thankfully, this lady's now getting some healing. And I know one of the things I think Rachel would like is at some point this person maybe to go back to that priest and let them know that because of the fact that they spoke out, this woman is now getting healing. So sometimes when we talk, we might see the anger. That doesn't necessarily mean we've done something wrong. And I think it's important to look at that, because the other thing that I want to say, if we want to be effective pro-life representatives, we need to be aware of self-doubt. That can be, for those of us who are Christians, I should say that's something that the enemy can use, but I think we'd all recognise the problems that self-doubt can end up having in our role in our ministry. So if you're sharing the pro-life beliefs, if you're having a conversation with somebody, doesn't go to plan, it doesn't necessarily mean you've done something wrong. If somebody's angry at you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're at fault. You can imagine if you were that priest and you'd spoken and you'd just seen this woman, you know, raging with anger at you afterwards, it would be very easy to think, oh gosh, what a mistake. You know, wish if that had been someone else speaking, the conversation would have gone differently. Clearly, you know, obviously I haven't got the knack. I won't do that again. No, anger often is the first response to truth. So don't, you know, yes, it's good to kind of reflect on what you've said, but don't kick yourself if a conversation doesn't go well. It's often maybe what that person is dealing with. And then the other side of that coin of self-doubt is the pride. So if a conversation goes bad, don't kick yourself about it. If a conversation goes well, be wary of your own ego. And I say this because I see this causing so much division. And this is another point. If we want to be effective pro-life representatives, we need to be really aware of division in the pro-life movement, between organisations, but between individuals. And I see this so much. And often the root of that, as I say, can be pride, it can be jealousy, sometimes just out-and-out pettiness, or just bearing grudges. I know sometimes when I'm organising the rota for 40 Days for Life, I'll get someone phoning up and going, don't put me on with so-and-so, they pray too quickly. It's like, seriously? Can we not put up? I mean, I appreciate the fact that it can be annoying if you're praying with somebody and they pray quicker than you. But we've got to be able to bear with each other a little bit better than that if we really want to have maximum impact. And sometimes that's why it's just good to be really wary of it and recognise where this is coming from if divisions are creeping in. And rather than having division, one of the things I think is really helpful is to look at how we can affirm and complement each other. And I'd particularly like to address you guys here today and just thank you so much for being pro-life guys, because I know it takes a little bit more effort maybe to be a pro-life guy than to be a pro-life female, because I know you become under a particular set of aggression sometimes from those who support abortion. You know, what right have you got? You're a man. This is none of your business. Keep out. I know all the men who join in our 40 Days for Life, pretty much every single one has been called a pervert or a paedophile at one point, and yet you couldn't meet a nicer bunch of guys. So thank you guys for your strength of character in witnessing to the pro-life beliefs. Good on you. What I'd like to say is you have a particular effect if you're able to give words of affirmation to women. And I use affirmation rather than compliments, because sometimes compliments are misconstrued. Obviously, I'm not talking about anything inappropriate and flirtatious or that people might misunderstand. And I'm particularly talking about to women, because obviously we know women are legally the decision makers when it comes to abortion. If we look at the commandment in the Bible, and again, you don't have to be religious to understand where I'm coming from with this, we're told, love your neighbour as yourself. How can we expect a woman to love her neighbour, as in her preborn child, that she can't even see, as herself, if she doesn't love herself? There are so many women who are growing up nowadays not really loving or valuing themselves because they haven't had real love shown to them. And I'm not necessarily talking about any kind of romantic kind of love, but just that genuine concern and selfless care for someone else, particularly from a man. It can mean a lot to a woman. And I think that's possibly why we have had a lot more women change their mind outside the abortion centre after talking to men than to women, because a lot of these women have only had men treat them with a very weak and conditional kind of love. If a woman only feels loved or worth something because of her boyfriend, and her boyfriend is threatening to leave because of her pregnancy, guess what she's likely to choose? Her boyfriend. If she only feels valued because of her career, and her career looks to be in jeopardy because of a pregnancy, guess what she's likely to choose? Her career. So many people have not experienced a genuine, real love. If 1 in 4 women have had an abortion approximately, and an awful lot more have considered it, some are even considering it right now, the chances are at some point you've been sat next to one of these women on a bus, or you've commented on one of their social media posts, or you've even chatted to one of them at university or college or at work, maybe when they've been in that point considering an abortion. Try and make sure that that interaction that you have with them leaves them knowing something of their true value. And as I said, I'm not talking about anything inappropriate or creepy, but genuine affirmation to women. So whether it's your girlfriend, your sister, your mum, your friend at uni, or just a colleague, let them know that they're a good listener, that they give sound advice, that you enjoy their sense of humour, that they're great company. We all want to feel valued, we all want to feel loved, and the woman that really needs to hear it won't have it written on her forehead. So get used to doing that freely, and as I say, particularly you guys, it's something that we women need to work on as well, but sometimes women affirm other women better and more easily than men do, and it can mean so much to women when men do it. And as I say, if we just get used to doing that, and that's something that we could do even before we leave this conference this weekend, that could be the first thing that we do. It could be a text that you drop to somebody that you know, just something genuine, affirming them in themselves or what they're doing and who they are. If we really want to be the best and most effective representatives of the pro-life movement, we really need to work on it and actually think about how we can do this. And if we are individually effective and good faces of the pro-life movement, then think how powerful we can be when we come together. And one of the ways, of course, we can do this is with March for Life. If you haven't been to March for Life yet, why? This year, it's on the 2nd of September. And if you have been, I won't need to encourage you again because I know you will have loved it. We had record numbers last year. Let's double that and get even more this year. So save the date for the 2nd of September. There's some leaflets on our stall if you want to take some to distribute at some point. I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, make sure you save that date and keep it ready. And I'm just going to end by sharing a little video. Our theme for this year is Freedom to Live. This is a theme that I think is really in keeping with what's going on nowadays, because so many of us are aware of maybe infringements on our freedoms, whether it's people having certain views to do with vaccines, whatever they might be, one way or the other, and they're like, oh, my freedom to do this, my freedom to do that, freedom to protest, freedom to think, in my case, freedom to pray. The most fundamental freedom is the freedom to live. So please make an effort to come and stand up for those who can't speak for themselves at this year's March for Life. Thank you.